Hi everyone. So today's session we're going to be looking at is looking at Learning Outcome 5, and we'll be looking at session 8 and 9 from the slides that we've got. And in the last session we looked at the effective communication in health and social care. We looked at session 6, which was to look at how easy it can be to get the message across when confusion has arisen, and identifying alternative forms of communication. We also looked at identifying difficulties with communication and how they could be adapted in order to meet individuals' needs. We also looked at explaining the positives and negatives of different forms of communication. So we started off with looking at key facts to remember. Sometimes alternative communication to meet people's particular needs, such as, like people that have disabilities, visual impairments, or any sort of hearing impairments. And we watched a video on the difficulties that people would have, and any sort of alternatives to communication. We also looked at communication difficulties that an individual would have, and had a case study and looked at that. We looked at alternative forms of communication. And we looked at things like, for example, we looked at Braille, British Sign Language, Mercato, finger spelling, text messages, interpreters of speech, translators for written or verbal language, objects of reference, communication passports, symbols, technology aids, and pictures and advocates. And then we identified the positive and negatives of each of them with reference to looking at the alternative communication in a form of a table. We then looked at the session 7, which was looking at more detail on Braille. What was the outline, what Braille is. We looked at identifying where Braille came from. We also looked at outlining our own name using Braille. We analysed own ability to complete and read Braille, identify where Braille is used today, and outline software that can be used to support Braille. And we identified that Braille is actually a method that is used by many that are blind and partially sighted around the world, and that it's a method of reading by touch. And each Braille character is made up of 6 dot positions arranged in a vertical rectangular of 2 columns of 3 dots. The 6 dots of each Braille cell are arranged like the example above to form a letter. We also looked at the history around Braille, how it was adopted, where it came from, and the individual that dealt with the issue around Braille. We looked at the Braille alphabet. We also looked at the fact that how Braille can be used in the care setting to make service users available. And we looked at Braille today, the use of Braille, where it is used, and the softwares that are created to look at Braille. We're going to now look at session 8, which is to look at the issues around identifying BSL, which is the British Sign Language. So in this session, we're going to be looking at identifying what BSL is, identifying some basic BSL hand signals, identifying what finger spelling is, and justify how we use sign language within a setting to support service users, for example, the healthcare profession, outline communication through sign, and also identify basic Makaton information. So start to famous people. So can you name 5 famous people that are deaf? And some examples that we've got on the next slide are people that are deaf and that obviously require the use of BSL. You've got Thomas Edison, due to having scarlet fever when he was young. That's number 1 there. And then we've got number 2 is Shelley Beetle, deaf at age 3 because of an aspirin overdose. Heather Whitehouse, Miss America, 1995, lost her hearing when she was 18 months. She was the first deaf woman to ever win the Miss America. And then Shoshana Stern, Weeds actress, was born deaf. So these are some famous people that have been born deaf. There's also some other people that I think are quite obviously famous and in today's society. So we've got people like Chris Martin, one of the actors, will.i.am, singer and a rapper. We've got a very famous person, which a lot of you will know, is Beethoven. He was a German pianist born in 1770 and is regarded as one of the greatest classical composers ever. And his deafness, he started to lose his hearing at the age of 26 with a suspected disease called typhus, which was lead poisoning. And there's different examples of people like Eric Clapton, Marley Martin. These are people that are deaf within the actresses and actors that are deaf, and also singers as well. So what is BSL? Now, when we look at BSL, we identify the importance of how it came about. And it's been around for centuries, BSL, and was created by deaf people forming communities throughout the UK. The first official record of BSL was at a wedding ceremony at St. Martin's Church in 1576. And in 1500s, Pedro Ponce de Leon, a Spanish monk, adapted these signs to help him educate deaf students in Spain. He's the first recognised teacher of deaf work, and his work paved the way for the creation of the instruction of the formal sign language. Thomas Bradwood, a teacher from Edinburgh, founded Braidwood's Academy for Deaf and Dumb in 1760, which is believed to be the first school for deaf children in Britain. So just looking back at what BSL is British Sign Language. This is the standard two-handed finger spelling alphabet used in British Sign Language. Sign language is a visual means of communicating using gestures, facial expressions, and body language. Sign language is used mainly by people who are deaf or have hearing impairments. All photographs are taken from the perspective of somebody looking at the person signing. Then we've got the British Sign Language, and there's a video here that you can look at in regards to British Sign Language and how sign language is used within organisations or within trying to use sign language for communicating with individuals. Finger spelling, this is representation of letters, numbers by tracing the shapes of the letters in the air or on a hand. American, French, and Irish Sign Language are all examples of one-handed finger spelling as compared to the British Sign Language, which is two-handed. Now, for you to learn British Sign Language, you can log on to Oracle to access the PowerPoint, and this actually helps you as an individual to identify any issues around sign language, but also identify how to do certain phrases in sign language, you know, like how to say hello, how to say thank you, how to spell someone's name. You know, it identifies and helps individuals if they need to communicate with anyone that's obviously got any issues around using BSL. So let's practice our BSL using the skills you have gained and the BSL alphabet that you have practicing with. Please show your partner how to sign your name. Extension. If you are confident with signing your name, use the internet to research common words service users may use in a setting and copy images of how to sign it on a colourful way to display it. Write a paragraph of reflection on the below statements. How could we use sign language within a setting to make service users aware? How could you make sign language into rewarding session to ensure an inclusive environment? What I do want to go on to is this. Let's see if we can get onto this oracle, but we'll do that towards the end. Then you've got communication through sign. So comprehension supports verbal information, providing listener with a visual clue. Accompanying speech with signs has more impact than the words alone. So signing is more likely to capture listeners' attention. And then we've got expression. So it gives a non-speaker or a person with unclear speech a way of communication until they can say it clearly. Signing takes the pressure off, which then allows for concentration to become easier. Signing always fades when speech develops. So signing, we all use gestures. Signing just is a more formalized version of that. Signing is being used increasingly by those who come into contact with children and adults with communication difficulties. For example, in the healthcare profession, and if you have a young child or if you have someone that you are working with, then obviously you need to be able to communicate with sign. Also, if you have patients within the health and social care sector, it's very easy for you, if you know how to sign, to communicate with that individual. Makaton is also a method of communication through using signs and symbols. Unlike British Sign Language, it uses speech as well as actions, symbol and pictures. Makaton ties in facial expressions with the word to make the word more easily recognized by those who have communication difficulties. And there's a video there in regards to the use of Makaton. Please complete the self-study, Deaf Club, British Sign Language, Overcoming Barriers to Communication. And sign language is a barrier to communication, but does help. Most deaf people who use sign language in the UK use British Sign Language, which we've referred to as BSL. It is a rich combination of hand gestures, facial expressions, and body language, and like English, has its own grammar, Signex, and lexicons. BSL acts as a bridge between the deaf and the hearing people. People with hearing impairment can feel isolated if they cannot communicate spontaneously. So, it's really important if you have a patient who's deaf, that you are able to communicate with them, because then, they feel isolated as well. As society, our responsibility is to address the issue and encourage the widespread use of effective means of communication that can be employed. Sign language is a way of communicating visually using, as we stated, hand gestures, facial expressions, and body language. It is mainly used, as we said, by people that are deaf to support those who have a hearing loss. Offering a qualified medical interpreter free of charge and having translated written materials is a good way to overcome language barriers with patients and comparisons with limited proficiencies. BSLs has evolved naturally over time, but today it's generally based on combination of, as we mentioned, lip patterns, shoulder movements, and body language. BSL is an important method of communication because it is used by those, again, who have hearing impairments and who have difficulty speaking. It's made up of a number of actions. The visual character of BSL distinguishes it from spoken languages. To communicate effectively in sign languages, people must be able to see each other clearly. So it's really important, and especially within the health and social care profession, that BSL is used and adopted if people are able to, you know, have difficulty, you know, listening or having any sort of hearing problems. BSL is the main thing that is used to overcome any sort of barriers, because people become less confident and they become isolated if, you know, if they're not be able to communicate. So sometimes, you know, individuals that are working within the healthcare profession maybe need to be trained around BSL just for their own benefit as well, so that they can communicate better with individuals, patients, or any other staff members that have got hearing impairments or are deaf. And then we've looked at this self-study, which is study task titles, and it's the Deaf Club, British Sign Language, and it's an article on overcoming barriers to communication. So now we're going to go on to session 9, which is the final session, looking at communication in health and social care. So in this session, we'll be looking at explaining why clear communication is important when working with service users. We're going to look at identifying different signs and symbols that are used to communicate, outline STC symbols, and identify identify how symbols can be used and who might use them. So please pair it up with someone. This is a starter activity, and you need to write down a step-by-step about how to make a cup of tea and the way you like it. Once you have written down step by step, please pass it to another colleague. You will need them to make a cup of tea following your instructions. Why is it clear? Why is it clear? Communication important. Remember that, you know, it's so important when in placement and working with service users. Good communication skills and have a positive impact on health, the health profession, because, you know, you're able to communicate clearly and you're able to, you know, communicate without any issues around that, and your message is clear for the other person to understand. So by delivering messages clearly, there's no room for misunderstanding or alteration of messages, which decreases the potential for any sort of conflict. In situations where conflict does arise, effective communication is a key factor to ensure that situation is resolved in a respectful manner. Strong communication in healthcare is important in today's digital world, and also, you know, communicating with patients and service users effectively. Communication goes beyond enhancing the dynamic between the patient and the provider. It can be a tool that transforms the quality of care, which can ultimately improve the patient outcomes. It can allow patients to be better educated about their own health, and which could enable them to embrace things like, you know, have a more proactive and healthy life and strategies. It also helps patients develop comprehensive understanding of current care strategies involved in their health, including acute health conditions. And with communication, you know, it's so important you communicate, you know, you have effective communication and it's clear, because communication can also develop a sense of trust between the patient and the provider, which might make it easier for the patient to adhere to providers' recommendations. So these elements can lead to several key potential long-term benefits, such as reduced patient visits, reduced costs, and improved patient outcomes. They increase presence of technology makes effective communication even more important in healthcare. It can help mitigate the potential impact of health misinformation that could otherwise lead patients to make a more poor or improper decision about their health. It can also help improper communication among other healthcare professionals who need to coordinate care across multiple facilities. So it's so important within the healthcare profession to be able to, have a clear communication, because you need to be able to identify any sort of issues with any sort of, that you are clear by getting your message across to the person, and there's no sort of room for any sort of misunderstanding or alteration of messages, because effective communication is a key factor in regards to any sort of communication. And if it's why is clear communication important? Because if you're able to communicate clearly with the patient, you're able to put together a care plan maybe for the patient, or if there's any sort of medication the patient needs to take, you are able to identify that clearly to that individual, so they're not confused. They're able to listen properly, and effective communication examples can be as active listening, giving and taking feedback, giving advice, empathy and respectfulness, responding to messages, having volume and clarity in messages, understanding non-verbal data, building friendliness and confidence, adapting your communication style to the audience. So it's important to have that communication good communication and a clear communication between the patient and the actual doctor, may be nurse. It's that form of communication that makes the individual feel that they understand, and they can exchange information with the other person properly. If it's, for example, if you have a patient who has cancer, you need to be able to talk to that patient to get the patient to understand the next steps or the care plans. So clear communication is really important, not just within the healthcare social sector, but within other sectors as well. Signs and symbols helps us to communicate. So why are signs and symbols important? The signs and symbols help us to communicate. If people have disabilities or anything like that, it helps them to communicate. But also, when you speak or write, your words act as symbols for what you are meaning to say. So graphic, pictorial signs, they help individuals. So it might be things like, only wheelchair users can use this. Things like sometimes, a visual form is of communication is good for people, and it also supports speech. It doesn't replace it, so it gives them extra visual information about any sort of message that they need to get through, and also can support communication. So for example, for children whose speech is difficult to understand or absent, signs and symbol can enable them to contribute something that others can't decode and understand. So there are different signs, and that would help an individual or even a child. So there's a video there that you can watch in your own time. Symbols. A symbol is a pictorial representation of a word or concept or idea. STC symbols are based upon rebuses which were developed in 1970s, and Peabody Rebus reading program in Nashville, Tennessee. They provide an extra visual clue. They provide an alternative means of expression. They are more immediate than written information, and they're more accessible for anyone who has literacy difficulties, and they can provide a bridge between pictures and written words. And, as we say, people that have difficulties understanding stuff or have speech impairments, symbols and signs are essentially part of our daily life. They help us communicate non-verbally with each other. They are used to represent certain ideas and objects, and they can also be used to indicate danger. You know, you can have signs there to identify if there's some sort of danger, if there's a pit hole, or if there's any sort of you know, hazardous detergents or anything like that. Symbols serve as communication tools and mental tools to construct an understanding of social emotional world. Even before children can consistently use language, symbols in the form of words and gestures facilitate social interactions of many kinds. You know, they are important within, they help to indicate any sort of hazards that present. For example, in a construction site, there may be a hazard in regards to, you know, maybe a tool that they are using or machinery. So they are there to sometimes be used as safety instructions as well. And sometimes, you know, and mostly in the health and social care profession, symbols and signs are used to express thoughts and ideas in physical form. So words are symbols, recreate, reinforce their meaning. Symbols are used to express our thoughts, the perception of things we have seen before, and the images of what those symbols mean in our mind. As a group, let's look at the website, and this is a website on how could you use this resource within your setting. So this is the website. It's called Somerset Total Communication, and it looks at the issues around different communication and how this could help within our communication in regards to, you know, our what could we use this resource as a setting. So the link is there for you to go on. In regards to how can symbols be used, symbols can be used to back up speech, to help understanding, to enable expression of needs and wants, to enable choices to be made, to give information, and to check understanding. A symbol is something that stands in for or represents something else. Symbols can be communicated verbally, speaking the word hello, in writing, putting the letters HELLLO together, or non-verbally by waving your hand back and forth. So, you know, symbols are important. Not only are symbols arbitrary, they are ambiguous. That is, they have several possible meanings. For example, when the word cat is uttered alone and without context, most people might envisage a small house cat. However, cat has other possible meanings too. Who uses symbols? Everybody. Examples are computer icons, road signs, logos, etc. So everyone uses symbols, and you know, the use of symbols is really good in regards to trying to get something across. They hold no visual resemblance to the concept or idea they represent. For example, the letter R represents a sound that doesn't have any image. Symbols from various sources, STC and Makaton, are increasingly being used by children and adults with communication difficulties and those who come into contact with them. We rely on symbols because they are often easily recognizable. If you are learning to drive and have not yet taken your theory test, you will need to learn common road symbols. Now, you know, in your theory test, you know, it's important that you use symbols because it identifies it. You have to have a test around it, and if you're able to identify what symbols are used, you know, it's important that you're able to represent them. And symbols can be verbal, such as words, or non-verbal. And you know, their example of symbols are a flip book is a communication book with tabs for easy navigation. And symbolic communication includes, like we said earlier, gestures, body language, facial language, as well as vocal moans that can indicate what an individual wants without having to speak. Research argues that about 55% of communication stems from non-verbal language. Signs and symbols are essential component of everyday life. Signs like zebra crossing are used on roads to help pedestrians. The thumbs up sign indicates okay or best of luck, and the radioactivity sign indicates radioactive danger. So signs we use in everyday society, and we use it in the health and social care profession, in regards to if someone wants to have a look where the needs to know where the disabled toilet is, there's a sign for a disabled toilet. It needs to, if someone is discussing giving instruction to a care worker, there are signs there. Also, if someone doesn't know where the toilets are, or if someone doesn't, if something is quite dangerous to go and they see a sign, and wheelchair user sign, toilet signs, a sign to a restaurant. These are things that are used in everyday life. Create your own. So create your own symbols that could be used with a care setting. You can use my examples below or think of your own. So be neighbourly. A sign that says a doctor. Sign that says pets are welcome here. A sign that says keeps your germs to yourself. Nurse. A sign that says only 2 visitors at a time allowed at the ward at the bedside. So there's examples of different signs that are used in everyday life. Now, the session we've finished now, in regards to, this was the final sessions in regards to completing the communication module. And these are some of the references that we've looked at. So we've got Amos J 2002, Making Meetings Work, How to Books. David Brake 2003, Dealing with Emails. Darling Kindersley. Browston Marty 2001, Communicating Effectively for Dummies. Heller, Communicating Clearly, Darling. Hindle, Managing Meetings. Hindle, Making Presentations. So these are the resources we've used that you can look at to help you complete the assignment. The next session we have will be the assignment discussion. We'll be looking around the different tasks that are needed in regards to the learning outcomes to complete the communication skills for health and social care management assignment. So thank you for attending today's session, and thank you for your patience, and we've finished the session now. Thank you.